Hello and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. It's a Wednesday, but there's no Paul John. It's myself and Yogi, as we're on every Wednesday, and we're joined by Kevin Graham. Paul John away on official Acsom business. Either that or he just couldn't stand another Wednesday of me and John ranting about Celtic. Um, but we're here, as we're here every Wednesday. They're there and they're always there. So I'll come to you first, John. I mean, maybe not the best of Saturdays, but I think Monday afternoon and then Monday evening has sort of cheered everyone up a bit. And I'm not sure we're on a high, but we're certainly on more of a high than what we were on Saturday evening. What have you made of the last week?
Yeah, well, I had said that I didn't think they were going to sack him, pretty much regardless. But what I'd failed to anticipate is just the abject nature of his losses. Excuse me, and got to the point obviously where you're losing so much and losing them in such a way that even the board had to take heed. Now, as I understand it, the board was split quite early on, and you hear a lot of these stories. But I would tend to believe that it was Nicholson, Mackay, and Dermot Desmond against the rest of the board from quite early on, and eventually they had to take heed of the concerns. Because the one thing about Nancy is, no matter what positives she saw, the negatives were such, and I was saying this a couple of weeks ago, for me, it was really, really obvious. In order to play that style, you need to have players that are leagues above the opposition in terms of quality. If you're going to dominate in that style, you need faultless midfielders, flawless defenders. You need the kind of players that we simply can't afford. We are never going to be able to play. Maybe if you're a team in one of the top divisions and you can afford to spend 500 million on players or whatever it is, but we were never going to be able to afford to play that. As soon as you lost the ball in transition, because technically speaking, sorry, I know this isn't where you wanted to go with it, but technically speaking, we were 5 in defence and all that sort of thing. But that's only if we got into defence. Do you know what I mean? And we were nearly always, because of the high line, we were nearly always in transition. We were nearly always attacking with the defence exposed. And all it took was simple balls to beat us. And we were never, ever going to be able to play that. I think, I saw that, the board saw that. Eventually, I think nearly every single fan saw that. I ran a poll at one point. It got, I think, 3,500 votes, and it was 95% against Nancy. I said, does the manager still have your support? And simple question, yes or no, and it was no, was 95%. So, it's not as if I'm some sort of tactical genius. To me, it was really, really clear that we just were never going to be able to afford to play that way. We just don't have the strength of squad, the strength of player, and we're never going to get one. Especially with this board, because, we'll come to that later, but nothing really has changed in terms of the fundamental things we want changed. But in terms of Nancy being away, I have to say I was incredibly relieved, because at least I thought they were going to force us through another COVID scenario where they were just, refusing to budge just to spite us. But this was so abject. I think if you get any sort of result on Sunday, a draw on Sunday, he'd still be here. Or Saturday, sorry, he'd still be here. If he get a win, he'd certainly still be here. So I think it was just the nature of the defeats that did for him. But I expected him to pick up the occasional win here and there, which would give them something to hang their hat on, which would give them something, to just ride out to the end of the season, which was just going to see us lose everything. This situation is salvageable, only under certain conditions, which we'll come to later. But, I was just so relieved. I'm not happy that man's lost his job, but I was incredibly relieved that the decision had been made. I had shared false hope earlier in the week because there was that many rumours. I jumped the gun too early when he cancelled the Acsom event. And I shared that with people, and then I really regretted that because, people were so desperate for some sort of change. And then I think that was unconnected, though. Now I'm really not sure what it was connected to be honest with you. But you know, there is cause for optimism, but only optimism relative to the situation that we've just come from, which was an utter farce. We are now in a situation where we're back to reality, and a lot of the reality hasn't changed. You know, this farce is not in full flow, but the reality hasn't changed. The reality is we have a desperately poor squad, and they are not playing well for multiple reasons. So, you know, we'll come back to that later, I'm sure. But, you know, let's just say I'm relieved. I'm considerably more optimistic than I was. But we still face enormous challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't speak for everyone. I'm sure on a sort of personal level, you know, I think most people probably do feel sorry for him as a person. Although I say that I couldn't watch many of his press conferences or interviews just because I don't know. It was quite difficult to listen to the guy speak and be so confident when his style of play wasn't working. I don't know about the rest of you. I was sitting, I think, it must have only been 20, 25 minutes into the Motherwell game. We were 1-0 down. We weren't playing well at all. Couldn't create a chance. And I'm turning to my mates going, we're looking at 6 losses out of 8. Surely no manager survives that. And I think in football and at a club like Celtic particularly, I don't think any manager does survive that, regardless of philosophy, regardless of how good he is as a coach. I think even Pep Guardiola at Man City, I don't think you can survive a run like that. So I mean, whatever worked for him in the MLS, it didn't work for him in Scotland. So I mean, I personally wish him well. I'm sure he'll get another job. But as you say, John, you know there are problems that existed before Nancy. One of them is gone. Paul Tisdale is gone, which was another pleasant surprise. Just what you're saying as well. I mean, I was actually quite surprised that we took the decision to sort of cut our losses. You referenced the COVID season. I thought we were going to stick with it for at least a few more weeks. Let them sign
Especially, Patrick, especially when you consider, and this is the thing that hasn't been clarified. So, Brendan Rodgers is responsible for everything being wrong. What did he have to do with the appointment of Nancy and Tisdale? I'm just wondering, you know, because obviously with Brendan being responsible for everything, and it's all been down to the one man trying to protect his position, which the irony of which is completely obviously lost on whoever penned that, just straight over their heads. Anyway, but you know, Wilfred, you have to assume Wilfred then was in cahoots with Brendan. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you know, was he in cahoots with Brendan before he came in to try and destroy the club, to ruin everything and be entirely responsible for all the ills of the club?
It's either that or we sort of accepted his resignation, and when he was on the way out the door, went, "Oh wait, Brendan, who would you appoint as manager? Oh, Nancy, right? Okay, we'll go for that." I think that's it. That's the only other explanation for Desmond's big rant back in the end of October. But yes, Paul Tisdale is gone. Nancy is gone. It came as a surprise to me. It came as a surprise to John. I thought they were going to dig their heels in, Kev, like they did with Neil Lennon. I mean, Lennon, it was a stay of execution that went on for 2 or 3 months before he eventually left the football club. But Nancy's gone, Tisdale's gone, Martin O'Neill is back. What have you made of the last 4 or 5 days of Celtic Football Club?
The last 4 or 5 weeks has been utterly bizarre madness. Truthfully, just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, it actually does. It's been the talk about 24 hours at Rock Celtic, and you see podcasts running with that. This has been 33 days at completely Rock Celtic, and just it's when you start making bad decisions, and these bad decisions started 2 or 3 years ago with poor transfer windows, and they keep on going and going and going. Next thing you get to the last 6 months where every decision that the people in charge have actually made has been wrong. And it's like me trying to put up a shelf and knocking down half the wall and going, aye, right, that's fine, we'll just redecorate the whole place. Then when you try to redecorate the whole place, you start bursting pipes left, right and centre, and that's just my normal DIY, right enough. And it's just a mess. Yes, he should have went. I don't feel sorry for him. He knew what he was coming into. And he never gave himself a chance for it to work. If he had came in and was pragmatic, knowing full well that he had done his homework, that this squad was never going to be able to play the way that he was play, and took counsel of the guys walking out the door, then he might have made it work, because he was coming in with no goodwill whatsoever. The folk who appointed him made sure that he was getting no goodwill whatsoever. And that's that bottom line. The guy was on a hide into nothing, and the only way that he was going to get time was to win games. What was Mr. Tisdale or whoever appointed him arrogant, believing to think that they could go through such a major change because the Scottish League is not that good, and we'll get away with it, and we'll still win the league, and we'll still do this, and we'll sort it in January buying all these guys that Paul Tisdale's got right off. Probably. There probably was a wee bit of arrogance in that, believing that they could do it. But the right decision was eventually taken. We can all point to that he was unlucky in certain games, apart from the game against Motherwell, when there was nothing whatsoever good about that 90 minutes. But any other game you can go, if you had a striker, if this happened and that happened, that's fine. But we lost we lost 6 out of the 8, mainly down to poor coaching. Poor coaching. Couldn't handle once changes were made. Couldn't handle it. At half time on Saturday, we're going down the stairs at half time, and the guy in front of us, maybe this is it, maybe this is it, maybe this is going to turn the corner, maybe this is going to be the result. It kicks him on. And there's about 4 years round about this boy, and we just laughed. We just went, have you watched the Celtic team? And in the last 4 weeks, when this game's not over yet, and the sinking feeling came as soon as you lost that equaliser, the players completely bottled it, and there was only ever going to be one winner at that point. Coming out of this, the players can't get away with it anymore. I'm really, really fuming at the players just as much as what I'm fuming at Nancy and the folk in charge of us for appointing Nancy. The players have always got a get-out clause. We didn't like this guy. We can't adapt to the way we play. We didn't understand what he's actually telling us to do. Well, you suddenly got an excuse now, because you've got a management team that have come back in that managed to get a tune at you. And even though you are a 3-string banjo, they still managed to get a tune at you. So they've got nowhere to hide. They've got nowhere to hide. Like you, I didn't expect them to do it, but I do believe that because there was crowds in the stadium, I think that's what pushed the change more. And look, we're getting conflicting information that it was Nicholson that went to Desmond, it was Brian Wilson that went to Desmond. Somebody's went to Desmond, and whoever it was, you've made the right decision, going, this is not working. And I'm not going to get into the folk that are going like that, oh, it just shows you the standard of the MLS, blah, blah, blah. We went for Brendan Rodgers to Nancy, and that's a massive, massive drop-off. Yes, I expected a drop-off for Brendan Rodgers to the next manager. I did, just because of where we play and the lack of ambition that we've actually got. But I didn't expect it to be such an underwhelming appointment. A guy who's never won 3 games in a row and had only won 11 out of his last 33. So it's a massive, massive mistake, and it could still have blown the season, because we are still massive underdogs to overturn this.
Can I just say, Kev, to me it just shows you the arrogance and complacency of the board.
Yes.
That they genuinely thought they were doing such a good job that everything was going swimmingly. What was actually happening is they were protected by good managers.
Correct.
So, Ange comes in, saves the day, Brendan comes back, keeps things on an even keel. These are high quality managers who managed to make this utter farce of a board in their decision making and lack of structure, lack of systems in place, managed to look as if it was actually a professional organisation rather than this lone bowling club complete disaster that it actually is. And then, the sort of casual attitude of, we've done not bad over the last 20 years. I'm like, yeah. No, mate, you're not getting pats in the back for that. You're a PLC board. Do you know what I mean? And the utter contempt with which they treat us is now, you know, has come to the fore this season. There's been no doubt left about it. And this is yet another thing which just exposes the folly of their belief that it's them. They're the ones that are responsible for all the success. They are not responsible for it. They have been covered. They are, you know, all their failings have been disguised by guys who are at the very top of their game, regardless of what you think of them. And you know, if you didn't think Brendan Rodgers had a point, I mean, I don't know what you were thinking, but if you didn't think Brendan Rodgers had a point, especially about the squad quality, but good God, I mean, all it took was one wrong turn, and see how badly that's been exposed. So I don't understand how they can just look at us with a straight face and still. And someone was saying there in the comments, so Ross Desmond admitted that the AGM mistakes were made. What mistakes? That's the whole point. What mistakes? Did he order the wrong paper? Did he put the cleaners in the wrong shift rota? What did he do? What mistakes did he make? Utter nonsense. They admitted nothing. They are still admitting nothing. And in the face of that, they've humiliated the club, they've humiliated the players, they've humiliated the fans, and they are the ones sitting there going, oh, well, it's not us really, you know, it's Tisdale, you know, and, you know, they want credit now for sacking guys. They want credit now for cleaning up the vomit they puked out, right? No, sorry, not happening. So, yeah, by the way, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm a wee bit annoyed. So, excuse me.
Man flu.
Aye. I thought that was notable in its absence. The statement, the announcement of Martin O'Neill, and then you had the three comments. You've got Wilson, Nicholson, and Desmond. And I'm not going to give them credit because, as you're saying, John, these guys are the ones that have made the mistakes, and they've been making mistakes. They've been making mistakes on and off for years, but in particular the last 12 months, since we sold Kyogo and chose not to replace him, I mean, it's just been one thing after another, and it really accelerated in the lead up and then after Kairat Almaty, in my opinion. You know, there was a call for unity, which I think is right, and obviously there's a collective statement that's come out, and we'll talk about that. But I think Brian Wilson is fair enough in his sort of comments for unity, but then followed Nicholson and Desmond's statements, and there was no apology, no holding hands up. You know, we've made a mistake, albeit when they say that, as you say, we're wanting them to actually say, well, what was the mistake and who's taking responsibility for this? What they've essentially done is they've got rid of Paul Tisdale, thrown him under the bus, albeit he was at fault for a lot of these things. But for me, Michael Nicholson has to go for this as well. I mean, to preside over such a shambolic recruitment team, to go out the Champions League, to fall behind in the league, to let Desmond, you know, release a statement like that on the website, and then everything that's followed since, appointing Nancy, publicly backing him, and then having to sack him 2 weeks later, it's absolutely amateur. And you know, it was sort of 2 out of 3 when they get sacked on Monday afternoon for me. I was hoping for Nicholson to be away as well, and I think he still should fall on his sword. But
I mean,
yes.
it depends what you believe, Patrick, right? Because there's, you know, there's rumours. I think it was Mark Greedy saying it was Nicholson calling for them to be sacked. That's not what I heard. There's rumours saying that Nicholson offered his resignation and was talked down. I assume it was Desmond that was doing the talking down. But, you know, for what reason, I don't know. Maybe because since Jim Henson died, sourcing a good puppet has become really difficult. So, you know, I don't know why he would want to talk him down. It's been an utter shambles. So, and then there's the one that said he is effectively, his resignation's been accepted, but, you know, he's been asked to see out the window because he was involved in planning for the window. So I don't know what to believe, but all you know is who is responsible ultimately. And the CEO is responsible because even if it was Dermot Desmond that wanted Tisdale appointed, it's the CEO that has to run the operations. Yes, he can't say no to Dermot Desmond, but if he cannot not technically anyway, but if he had anything about him at all, he'd have managed up the way and said, look at this guy's CV, Dermot. Come on, let's get serious here. Look at his CV. You know, how can we possibly appoint this guy as a head of football operations? Anything to do with football operations? What has he done to justify that? And rather than do that, they just nod it through because the Messiah says so. Or the monarch, should I say. He's not the Messiah, he's just a very naughty boy. So, you know, and essentially we're left with this, no matter how you cut it, of all the people who can be sacked or can be got rid of, Michael Nicholson is right at the top of that tree. And after that long list, and you laid it out there well, Patrick, there's a long list, if you know, people have put it online as well, of the mistakes that have been made, and no admission and no accountability, and you know, no action taken in order to change anything. As far as we know, literally nothing has changed, right? So we're back to the same system we had now. You know, the football department's basically empty. I think there's one scout in there. Sean Maloney's trying to do the scout's job and the manager's job and the coach's job and everything else. So, you know, and what are we left with? We're left with, you know, the empty building, and Michael Nicholson is now doing football transfers, right? Which is, like, I'm not saying is the least desirable outcome, but I can't think of a lesser outcome, you know. But anyway, sorry.
There's one thing has changed though, John. There's one thing has changed, which maybe a lot of folk haven't thought about, is we will never look outside for anybody again to give us advice on how to run the football department. After Tisdale's walked in and went, I've got this guy who can actually do a job. And now you're back to whoever Desmond plays golf with. And mind you, he might be a bit, I mean, he did meet Paul Tisdale at somebody's wedding, and the boy maybe bought him a couple of pints and got into his head and went, look, I could do a great job on that nice wee PowerPoint presentation. Next thing you can, he's in the club, eh? But when it comes to appointing managers, we're back to whoever Desmond's played golf with, and who's got Desmond's ear, and who's Desmond's got in his file fix. And that's where we are. That's where we're back to. And we've all been shouting for a sporting director. We kind of appointed a sporting director, but he was an absolute spoofer. Yeah. And so, but they'll never go back that way. So there you go.
But I mean, he was conned, and this is the thing. I mean, Desmond, this incredibly astute billionaire, is effectively like a 74-year-old who was a victim of a con. And, you know, you have to have some sympathy for him, I suppose, in that way. The same as you would if someone come round to your ma's dressed as the Alecki man and wanted in the door and all that sort of thing. He was a victim of an utter fraud.
We need to report him at the BBC, that programme on the BBC, Rogue Traders. we need to raise a case to them.
Yeah, rogue doctors, the football doctors. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that we look too much internally, but the fourth manager of the season is the same as the second manager of the season, is the same as the manager 25 years ago. So I'm not saying we go back to the well too often, but at least now the cycle's really shortened, you know, from 25 years to just a couple of months, you know, 30 days or so before we go back to the last guy. You know, it's amazing. Celtic must be the only people, the only club in the world who think that the pool of talent, the pool of football talent, begins and ends with guys that they've met, you know, down at the golf or something like that, or that used to play for the club, but you know, are Irish, and Dermot knows. Yeah, they just have no concept of going outside of that. And the reason why we ended up with Nancy was because of exactly that. Nancy seems like a left field appointment, but only when you don't understand the Tisdale scenario, you know, because it was exactly that. It was like, as you said, Kev, met at a wedding, you know, spoofed the poor old guy, poor old Uncle Dermot was, you know, conned, and talked a good game, got into him. Good God, I mean, if talking a good game was all it took to get into these positions, you know, I'd be a director of football. You know what I mean? If that's all it took, And that's apparently all it did take. You know, maybe if I'd met Dermot Desmond, I could have been in there, you know, signing guys from one Israeli club that are on his loan to another Israeli club, you know, 20-year-old right wingers who don't even have a Wikipedia page, and when you can see, you know, some sort of highlights on TikTok or somewhere, highlights would be generous in the extreme. And that's another reason why, you know, that sort of approach has to be binned, especially in this window. Just forget it, man. Stop, you know, the notion that anyone that Tisdale recommended should still be signed. I mean, oh, please, show me the evidence for that. Show me how successful that's been. You're still going to sign the guy? What for? You know, on what feasible grounds are you going to sign this boy, right, who's clearly not good enough, right? Not even remotely to help the first team at the moment. You'll be lucky if he could make the B team from what I've seen. You know, and we're still going to go through it and do what with him. And it's, you know, we're talking about, apparently Chris Mackay wants to cut the wages down, and we've got, you know, too many guys not contributing and all the rest of that. I agree with all that. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring another guy in and then do what? Pop him out on loan, hopefully. You know, it's wild that someone's still considering that. You know, unless Martin O'Neill's seen him and wants him, forget it. Just forget it. Bin the whole thing, bin the offer, leave it at that.
That is the big question, John. You know, as you've highlighted with what you just said, and as well as Maloney doing about 6 jobs, as well as still being the pathways manager, you would assume. Yeah, I mean, what a wage you must be on doing about 6 jobs at once. My God. But it's just what you were saying about the board as well. I mean, it's as if the standards are sort of uniquely low. I mean, Dermot Desmond, if his other businesses were ran, you know, like Celtic are currently run under his stewardship, you know, I don't think he'd be worth €2 billion. I think he'd be worth sort of minus -2 billion. The amount of trouble he would get himself in, because it is like a bowling club at times. We've hired a guy to be our director of football operations because, you know, he was really interested in statistics and done really well at Exeter 18 years ago. And we're signing like sort of, you'd assume an agent recommendation from the Israeli league. I mean, the guy, I didn't realise he didn't have a Wikipedia page. That's actually incredible. That's impressive in itself, really. I thought that's how they scouted the boy, actually. That they just sort of got the Wikipedia pages up.
He hasn't even got a youth.
You think you'd make one up yourself, wouldn't you?
Maybe he's just humble. He goes, I don't deserve a Wikipedia page yet. But I mean, like, you know, to have him, to be such a successful man. So I mean, he's obviously successful with the money he's made, and it's as if Celtic is an exception. Some of the decisions that we make, just having his pals on the board. You've got to actually worry, I think, for his mental faculties. The fact that so many people have pulled the wool over his eyes. I mean, that's Brendan Rodgers, Paul Tisdale, Wilfred Nancy. Michael Nicholson's still doing it. He's still in a job. He's still at it. But I think that's it's everyone's complaint that the standards are a lot lower in the boardroom than what they are in the stands. And you know, we're sort of delving into transfer activity. You know, we've signed Arojo. I mean, you've got to laugh at that Anthony Joseph tweet that we exclusively wanted him on loan, and they were at their limit for sending players out on loan. The shrewdness and the intelligence at work here is incredible. We've obviously been linked with the boy, as you're saying, the winger out in Israel. You've got to wonder why we keep going back to these markets. I mean, I know we sort of got, I think it was Beaton and was it Sorrow, I think, came from Israel as well.
Abada
as well, obviously.
Abada actually came from this boy's parent club, the club that he's on loan from. So, you know, I'm not expressly saying that these things are just, you know, completely unlikely, but what we need now is, when you're talking about a squad, what we need now is guys who go straight into the first team and put the boys that we have on the bench. Right? That's what I mean by strengthening the squad. There are so many gaps, so many replacements needed in that first team, that just signing another guy who's going to come in and maybe be good in a year and a half, 2 years, we just can't do it. We cannot do it unless you're willing to sacrifice this league. And I know they will be. And I know if we do get anyone, it's going to be a massive slice of luck and an agent at the last minute going, here, listen, this fella's desperate. You know, it'll be something like that.
Part of the surprise of them sacking him now, I think, obviously, in the 10 season, it was a bit like they gave up. They were just going to dig their heels in, stick it out with Lennon. Who cares about the league? We're just going to repay our faith in Neil. This season, they've changed. I think whoever it is that made the decision, we want to go out and win the league. For that, you're right. We do need sort of 4 or 5 players. You were saying, Kev, you know, the players can't get away with this. There's so many in that team just patently not good enough. And for some of them, I feel sorry for them. For some of them, I don't. Guys like Johnny Kenny, young player, thrown in there because we don't have a striker. It's not his fault that he's not got the ability to play for Celtic, in my opinion. Guys like Ralston and Schmeichel and, you know, other players in the team that aren't performing, even Luke McCowan, in my opinion, these are guys who certainly didn't perform on Saturday, in my opinion. And as you say, John, we need to be signing players to put in those positions. And I thought, to win the league, you know, just get 4 or 5 sort of decent loan options. It's an emergency situation. We just need to get the quality in ASAP. But you've also got the Champions League qualifiers, hopefully, come the summer, Kevin. So on one hand, you're sort of scrambling about just trying to win the league, and that's the most important thing. But we really should, as a club of this size, be preparing for the qualifiers, and therefore you need to sign at least 1 or 2 players on a permanent basis who are absolute quality, you know, can come into the team straight away. And I mean, how long have we been saying it? We need to sign a first choice striker. We've been saying it for literally over a year. And still, there's barely even rumours, Kevin. So, you know, I was thinking when this all first kicked off, just get a good few loan players in from Man City or something, exploit that connection again. But I think we really need to sign some top quality players, and that's going to cost us, you know, top dollar, obviously.
When I was on the pod on Monday, it was Monday when everything went mental, and I says I want it to be permanent. If it's Martin or whoever, anybody else, I want Martin at least a 1.5 year deal, or I wanted Postecoglou for a longer deal. Now, the reason being was this situation that we found ourselves in the summer, with Rodgers no committing, and the club weren't willing to commit the money to Rodgers because he wasn't committing. And then you get to a point where you end up going out to Calmette or Martin and get left with the worst squad that we've had in years and years. We've now got a situation with 18 games left where we're talking to players and the players are going, well, what's happening in the summer? If I'm going to come here permanently, what's going to happen in the summer? And we're going, oh, we didn't actually ken, but we just come here anyway and it's fine. Now you've got a situation where anybody that's looking longer term, we're getting scored off their list. Unless they're like this wee boy coming from Israel who doesn't actually ken where he's going. He's getting put on a plane, his agent's going, I've got you a move, pal, on you go. So we're in, and that was one of the disappointing things when you saw interim. It kind of took the wee shine of Martin coming back, because I'm going, right, we're really, really looking short term here. We're looking at the end of the season, then we'll review it again in the season. And the noise is going to continue from now to the end of the season when Craig Bellamy doesn't get Wales to the World Cup next year. Ken, that's Bellamy at the top of the list. Kieran McKenna, Ipswich doesn't get promoted. There's going to be a whole load of noise here because we are looking at short term. I probably agree with you. I probably agree with the Bayfies. I do reckon there will be a whole load of loans from clubs, probably English loans, and it will be short term looking from agents that we've worked with before, because Martin's already mentioned physicality, and we could do with a load of physicality. We could do with a spine, and I do think it'll be any guys that we sign permanently will be kind of project, and any of the ones that will walk into the first team will be probably for English Premier League teams who are not getting games down there, and we're going to hope that they hit the ground running, because we are still a club. It's an utter skip fire, and players who are looking to make their next step of their career are not going to come to us in January, not knowing what's going to happen in the summer here. We're very, very unstable, and it's not a very good look. Yes, I'm glad Martin's back in that, but we need help. We really, really do need help. But it's going to be a very, very short-term view for now to the end of the season because of the circumstances that our rulers have put us in.
I could just say that made me laugh unintentionally. A comment there saying, "Stop looking back to Ange. It's time we looked forward. Time we look forward by appointing the fourth manager of the season, who's the same as the second manager of the season, who's the same as the manager from 25 years ago." Yeah, okay, that seems like a reasonable point. Okay,
Ronnie Dyler's disappointed that we haven't went back for him. he was next to the phone going, "Oh, next in line for you."
Oh, absolutely raging.
He might be the Paul Tisdale replacement. Maybe not cut out as a manager, but cut out as a director of football. But I mean, it goes to show, the more you think about it, the more problems arise, Kevin. I mean, I hadn't even thought about the perspective of a player who we try and sign permanently. I mean, we don't know what's happening. We have no idea who our permanent manager is going to be come July, and we obviously don't know what that permanent manager wants. That guy might want to play three at the back. Let's hope not. But the amateur nature of the way that we are run has put us in a situation where, as you say, there's no structure, there's no vision. We don't know where we're going to be in a month, never mind 6 months. And it has made us I'm not going to say unappealing, but certainly less appealing than what we were 6 months ago. And it makes our situation a hell of a lot more difficult. And you could talk about the board probably all day, every day, based on the season that we've had. But I'll move on to the statement from the collective, which was released, I want to say yesterday. Now, after the game on Saturday, I don't know about the rest of you. I certainly didn't feel like going to Dundee United in 1 degrees this coming Saturday. I was very, very tempted. In fact, me and my dad discussed just sitting it out. It's not something I do often, but I really could not face that if Nancy, Tisdale and Nicholson were all still there. Things have changed. Obviously, Martin O'Neill's in the dugout. Certainly on the pitch, we're feeling a lot more positive. And the statement, I'll not read it all, it's 3 pages long. But essentially, they're sort of backing Brian Wilson's call for unity. They're backing O'Neill. We need to get behind the team. It's obviously really important. We try and win the title. And they're looking for a bit of communication, which I think is another positive step. I mean, we've had sort of 12 months of bad decision making. Hopefully now we're seeing a bit of good decision making. I'll come to you first, John. What did you make of the statement? And I think actually more importantly, I was saying there about thinking about staying home. The statement said 142, I think, supporters buses were sort of overwhelmingly in favour of a boycott. I'm pretty sure the collective probably would have called for a boycott based on that evidence. I'm not a member of a bus or a CSC. Me and my dad were tempted to stay home. I think it could have get really, really embarrassing for the club come Saturday if they didn't get rid of Nancy. So it was a good decision, but it's one that would have had really dire consequences if they never made it. So what did you make of the statement? And is it sort of, you're moving in the right direction, albeit there are people there that shouldn't be there long term. I think it is a step in the right direction, is it not?
Well, I thought Brian Wilson's call for unity was utterly hollow because it wasn't backed up by anything. He offered no olive branch. He didn't extend a hand. He just said, let's get unified behind the team and the players and the board and all the rest. What do you mean by unity, Brian? What do you mean by that? Especially when you're just saying it. Anyone could say that. It's just nonsense. What do you mean? You mean just let's forget everything that's happened? Let's forget how we got here. Let's forget how you got there. Let's forget what the board have done. Let's forget what the board haven't done. Let's just all happy clap. Is that what we are saying? To me, it seemed utterly hollow. And I was delighted then to see the collective take an adult response to it, which was, that's fine. If you want unity, why don't we talk about it then? What? Absolutely. So we're back to you now, Brian. Ball's back in your court. So you're the one that wants unity. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to say anything? Are you going to sit down with these people who represent so many tens of thousands of supporters? Are you going to sit down with them and talk to them? Or are you just going to sit there and talk about unity and what unity actually means to you? Would you mind just being quiet unless you're in the ground and then, try and make up for the GB that we've banned and we're not letting back in? If that's fine, then we'll go on with doing things the way we've always done them without any further interruption from you lot, because you're so desperately relieved to have a potentially a situation which is still salvageable. And everyone is. And I've seen multiple people argued with someone last night about it. People saying, oh, now is not the time for any further protest. Why? Why? What has changed? They have conceded nothing. Not a thing. Right? Now, I think there was going to be a boycott, whether it was official or not, against Dundee United, because people are just obviously scunnered and furious. You know, I wouldn't suggest it was a boycott now. I think, you know, again, with the situation as it stands, you know, I think people will go anyway to lend the manager their support, lend the team their support, and hopefully see some improvement. I don't think that's going to happen. But as for the rest of it, you know, the protests need to be ramped up, not ramped down. I mean, the board have just perfectly demonstrated why they are not fit for purpose, right? I don't know what more of an encapsulation you could possibly imagine as to what's happened this season. And yet now, because we're all so relieved that that farce is over after that horrendous appointment, right? We're now supposed to go, oh, well, thank God for that. Let's just get back and support the boys. We'll just forget, give the board a bye ball for the moment. No, not at all. Not at all. Support the team. Support the club. Do not support the PLC board, right? These are different things. It's not the same thing. These do not get a bye ball at this point. You know, I think the ground should be full, and it should also be full of sack the board chants and banners. That's what I think. Support the team and sack the board. And although it is easy to say, even now they must be under pressure because this is starting to accumulate. Right, these disasters are starting to accumulate one on top of the other, and all of them are self-inflicted. Right, so you know the fact that the notion that we should just let it be, to me, is insane. But however, I'm glad there's at least one set of adults in the room, and the collective have said that's absolutely fine, Brian. We would love to have a conversation. Please have a conversation with us. Here's the agenda. Here's the kind of things we would like to discuss. So what are you going to do about it, Brian? You'll just talk. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I was going to say unity is a two-way street. I don't think that's quite the same. I think respect is a two-way street. But I mean, you're calling for unity after you've made a bunch of mistakes. When the unhappy party, which is basically the entire support, are calling for a conversation, a bit of dialogue, you can't then cower away from that. I think if you're asking for unity and, you know, the majority of fans are still unhappy, you have to at least hear them out and see what you can do about it. And I think, you know, people who have made mistakes taking responsibility for those mistakes, I don't think that's an outrageous suggestion from the fans. Obviously, like, I totally support protests against the board. They've made so many mistakes and they've done serious damage to the club over the past 6 months. I think obviously what Brian is calling for is obviously that's going to feed into the team, which is unfortunate. I think that's unavoidable. When there's negativity around the club, it does feed into the dressing room. And obviously none of us want that, but at the same time we all want change at the top of the club. So it's a fine balancing act. But I agree that the collective must continue, the protests must continue, the demands for a higher standard at Celtic must continue. Kev, I don't know about your CSC. I don't know what you were thinking of doing personally. Would you have boycotted Saturday if Nancy and Tisdale were still on a job? Are you going to go along now and support Martin O'Neill? And then what was your thoughts on the statements from both Wilson and the collective?
When Celtic call for unity, what they mean is get back in the stadium and shut up and leave us alone. Toe the line.
Paradise win full tickets.
Aye, exactly. That's it. Buy pies, go to the superstore, just carry on as normal because we're taking steps to fix this. That's what they mean by unity. And I thought the collective statement actually pointed out, by the way, this is what we're looking for, and it's not a big ask what we're actually looking for. So that's it. But I've been in this situation before where I've been in a room and basically that's what they say unity is. You just do as we tell you and you behave and stop waving the flags and get rid of the banners and stuff like that. That's what they believe. There is an easy thing here that the collective punishment doesn't work. And now, whether these lads get charged, ends up in court or not, they've now got 4 names of guys who have been arrested for the incident that the whole Green Brigade got banned for. So you can let in everybody else bar those 4, because the collective punishment doesn't work, right? So you have got an out there foot losing face. I see it as an out foot losing face. Will they do it? No, they will not. They would have done it. You've got the fan media being banned as well, because we're willing to question them as well. That could have been lifted yesterday afternoon, and the fan media could be allowed back into the Martin O'Neill press conference. 2 easy wins without them losing face. With regards to the CSCs and that, on Sunday we received a survey. My CSC is a member of the affiliation. We received a survey to fill out about what we wanted to do in the next steps, and if we would boycott and stuff like that. Then on Monday, before everything went utterly mental, there was a vote as well put on our group chat to see if we would support a boycott on Saturday. My first feeling with that, I go right back to try to support my CSC at that point and go, why should a CSC be punished for the actions of idiots? Because if there is a boycott and we're still running a bus and it's costing us £400-500 to run a bus to a game which is empty because of the board. So that right away, that's why I said, well, I don't agree with boycotts. But then there was a lot of guys and lasses came on the group chat and went, no, we'll still pay our bus fare. We will still make sure that bus runs. We'll even go up and just go to the pub. They were still willing to support the CSC. For that point, I probably still would have went into the stadium. I mean, I've been leaving every game about 70 minutes anyway over the last couple of weeks. So that's I kind of have a walkout after 70, 71 minutes now, especially the last 2 games I've done that. So I would have went back into the stadium. I think I back the team. And even though I'm annoyed with them, I still believe that what we want to see is a winning football club, and I'll buy the team. I'll back the team. I think the Not a Penny More campaign has made a difference. I think it has made a difference. I also think there's other ways that you can actually target. No, the guys who are making the decisions in the boardroom and should not get away with this lightly. And unless there is drastic change in the protests, have got to continue. I didn't really agree with the singing or sack the board during the game. I sometimes think that's a bit contradictory, and that doesn't, especially when the team are suffering, especially when the team's suffering for confidence. It is really difficult, because you would never get a full boycott. But what you will get is apathy, and guys will just stop turning up. Doesn't matter if it's a boycott or not. Boys would just go, I'm just not going today. No, I've got something better today. Or the missus wants me to go shopping, I'm just going to do that. And the excuses would come out for them not taking up their season ticket or no going on the bus and that. So you'll get an apathetic, unofficial boycott. But when you ask for a boycott, it's really difficult to get everybody on the same page. You just have to have a look at the comments. You're never going to get anybody on the same page. You can have walk-ins and walk-outs. I think that's been tried. But you need to try to stop money, and asking folk to give up their season ticket is not that way. Asking folk to go to the games is not that way. But Not Another Penny More, I think, has actually worked. And even like, you can't let them away with it.
Well, I agree, Kevin, as much as it's most likely to be successful. The problem with protest is if it's convenient, then it's not working. So if you, as people always say, sing sack the board before the game and sack the board at half-time, nobody's listening. At half-time, nobody's listening. Half of them are away getting a drink or going to the loos. Nobody cares about what's happening at half-time and happening before the game. So it has to be during the game in order to have an impact. So that's the problem with that. In terms of the boycott, the reason why we never really supported boycotts before and until we were left with absolutely no choice was simply because, exactly as you said, if you look at the comments here, we do this often enough. You look at the comments here, you look at the comments whenever you mention a boycott online. I've got a decent number of followers, and you mention boycotts online, and it was split. It was completely split. You know, people were just, there's no way you were ever going to get agreement on it, right? And that's why I never really thought it was plausible. I think if things had continued, we would have seen the first actual boycott this week. I think we definitely have seen the first actual boycott, regardless. But I don't think that's going to happen now. And as you say, I think the Not a Penny More campaign is hurting them, will continue to hurt them. And that way, I think people can still support the team. And we're not kidding ourselves on about trying to organise a mass boycott when you're not going to get agreement on it. Although that said, you know, is it all the things you pointed out? If things continued, it would have been out of apathy anyway, whether it was organised or not. So I think the board have got off lightly here in terms of, I think it would have been a near empty stadium this week, you know, just out of disgust and apathy. And I don't think people would have been happy to go. And I think, you know, if things had turned the wrong way, it could have got really, really bad. But, you know, what you've seen with the Green Brigade is you don't even have the noise of people singing sack the board. It's not even a coordinated thing. So you've just got people just leaving early. Just that's all that, you know. And I had some boy saying since 1963 he's never seen that many people leaving early, and he was disgusted at the fans walking out when they did and all the rest of it in that Rangers game. And you're just like, look, these are unprecedented times with a completely different generation of fans who have only seen success. And you're asking them to suck this up. And the way that you're treating them like the dirt in your shoe, and you want them to accept that. You've made it very clear that Europe is just an aspiration. So this is the top of what we can hope to achieve against our supposedly biggest rivals. And we're getting slaughtered. And we don't even have, they've got their ultras and we don't have ours. You know, all of these things just add up to people having this feeling. And this is what I said before. Someone left a testimonial on my page once, and it was a quote from somebody else. So I can't actually remember who the quote was from, but it said, "They'll not always remember what you said, especially in a technical industry like ours. People won't always remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel." And this is the thing, you know. So it gets to a point here with an accumulation of all these things happening that the feeling people have, without going into detail, without breaking down all the individual issues, the feeling people have is just, I just can't be bothered with this. And if you ask them to break it down, they'd probably have a list, but the overwhelming feeling is just, I've just had enough of this. There's just too many things, and it's constant, and it's just, you know, it's a nightmare, and I don't want to be treated that way. I'm not happy with feeling like, you know, I'm being treated like some wee naughty child, and my investment in the club has been completely devalued, you know, as if I'm not entitled to a say on anything. All of these things, it's just all the things we've spoken about before, just all add up to eventually people going, as you said, I've got better things to do today.
Yeah, and it's already, I mean, even when Celtic are winning sort of doubles, trebles, even just league titles, it's already quite expensive to follow Celtic. I mean, I can't be more than 10 or 15 miles away from Celtic Park, so I have an unbelievable amount of admiration for guys who come over from Ireland, even just, you know, even if it's just 5 or 10 times a season, but there are guys who come over for every game or almost every game. And these past few months, I've been thinking to myself, God knows how they can justify that to themselves, because I certainly couldn't. I would be so apathetic, as you have been saying, to go through that financial commitment first of all, and then of course just the amount of time it takes to get to the stadium and stuff, either by plane or by ferry or whatever. So it's a tremendous effort, and you know, I started off by saying, you know, even when we're winning, it's a tremendous effort, but when it's not going well, and when you're making legitimate criticisms of guys running the club who make mistake after mistake, and it does feel as if they're just sort of, I mean, spitting in your face is a bit extreme, but certainly they don't seem to care about your legitimate concerns. It does breed a sort of apathy. And I'm not going to call me not going on Saturday an official boycott or my personal boycott, but it was apathy. I mean, 1 degree, 2 degrees outside, you're sitting there freezing, shaking, and there's guys in the main stand that don't care about your concerns, and the team on the pitch aren't doing that well. It's a very hard thing to get yourself up for. However, I am determined to end on a positive note.
Paddy, can I just 2 seconds?
Yeah, sorry,
can I just pick up on that? There is a point where you come to. My connection's always been with the team on the park, right? So when I've got that connection on the team on the park, I didn't care if the folk in the boardroom actually think I'm an idiot, who they didn't like me, and they didn't like me. But when you get to a point where you've had 2 or 3 years of bad decisions, and you've had bad decisions in the last 6 months, and they've came out and told you twice, we didn't actually care about you. We haven't got any ambition, and the team are getting rogered on the park. I'll leave after 70 minutes if I want to leave after 70 minutes because there's no connection to keep me there. But if the team are winning, I'm there. Because that is the only connection that I've got. That is the strongest connection that I've got. But if that team are getting rogered because of the mistakes of those sitting up the stairs and the guy in the dugout and the players not trying, sorry, I'll leave after 70 minutes, or I will be apathetic and no turn up. Or you want to go to Auchinleck Talbot on a Friday, you want to go to Kilmarnock on a Friday night to watch us play Auchinleck Talbot. Hold on, wait a minute. I have to double think about that. No.
And it's really, and I just go back to Patrick's point, because the guys that come from here, obviously I'm in Ireland, and the guys that come from here, I mean, the investment in time and the impact that has on relationships, and then the investment, it's either time or money or both. Because if you want to spend less time, you need to invest more money because you need to get flights, and even then, you might be looking at accommodation if you can't get the flights at the right times, all of that sort of stuff. Or you're going on the bus and the boat, and I would rather swim. I hate boats so much, right? But, you're looking at, especially now, we're in the dark days of January and February, and it is miserable, it is cold and it's raining, and people are having to get buses and get themselves over on boats and choppy seas to watch a team. And then, the directors are treating you in a certain way, and the team are not just worth watching because of the decisions those directors have made. But of course, they are infallible. But anyway, Patrick, what was the happy news you wanted to discuss?
No, I was sort of searching for positives there because I thought this is getting a bit heavy. But Martin O'Neill is back, and listen, you obviously will remember the amazing 5 years that he had as manager. He's basically a living legend to a guy like me. I've got no memory of him as manager, and obviously it's my entire Celtic supporting time, the last sort of 11, 12 years, we've basically been an embarrassment in Europe apart from last season. So to have a guy who competed in the Champions League year after year, got us to a European final, such a quality squad. I mean, he's back in the dugout for the second time this year. We have a chance, I'm sure we've all got different sort of percentages in our head what chance we have of winning the league. But there's a chance that he could lead us to another league title, maybe even a double if we somehow manage to win the Scottish Cup as well. And we've obviously still got a decent chance of getting a sort of playoff round if we beat Utrecht at home. So I just sort of wanted to get your views on, because we've not really touched on Martin O'Neill and what can sort of come following this. We've got Jota coming back soon. I want to say Johnston maybe comes back in March. I read that somewhere. We may or may not sign half-decent players in January. I mean, chances are slim, but we could see a few sort of quality players come in. So I'll come to you first, Kev. What are you sort of expecting from Martin and the team for the season ahead, or the half season ahead?
I says the other night there when I was leaving the stadium, I was talking to Leo, runs the Paul McStay bus for St Onions, and I says to him, the least I expect is the team to give us a wee bit of heart and fight. It doesn't matter how the quality of the players, as long as they give us a wee bit of heart and fight, then I can actually get behind that. I can really get behind that, and that's that's the minimum that I'm expecting. We got it in his first wee period here. Even when you remember that horror show against St Mirren, we still had that wee bit of harder fight to get that last minute goal. We were still going, and I just want them to restore that. Then hopefully we get a wee bit of like reinforcements, and even though they're going to be short-term reinforcements that can take us over the line, because we've got an absolute fight on our hands. We're still absolute underdogs, but I just want to see the team have a wee bit of pride of wearing that jersey again, and I think that's been lost in the last 4 weeks.
John, what are you expecting from St Martin for the next 5 months?
I'm if we don't get the necessary recruits in this window, I think it's going to be an absolute struggle, because eventually Martin got that bounce and he got the respect and he got guys digging in for him, but eventually the lack of quality will out and the lack of form will out, and I don't think Jota's coming back this year based on what I've seen of when his recovery is, and he'll be back late on in the year, and whether he actually gets any minutes, I would just count him out. AJ's not back for at least a couple of months. Again, the league could be over by then. That's a problem we have with the guys that are injured, or most of the guys that are injured. But it's also the issue we have with the board, and as much as they're saying, look, there's a load of guys on big wages, that will be back at some point. And are they prepared to pay up to win this league, to get that potential access to the Champions League? They weren't prepared to pay before the Kairat Almaty game. So are they going to be prepared to pay now to try and win this league from the position that we're in, with the players that we have, plus supplementing a few? It's going to be interesting to see. You would think that after Almaty and after everything else that's happened since, the manager merry-go-round and the abject failure, you think they might be more inclined to open up the purse strings instead of using that 77 million to pay off some more managers and coaching staff. We might be able to, I don't know, wangle some of it for a player or two. So Martin needs all the support he gets, because the squad, the reality is, as we all know, is the performances weren't great. We got great outcomes. We got some of those outcomes as a result of some fortunate breaks. Doesn't matter. We got great outcomes. Those fortunate breaks don't necessarily continue. That variance doesn't necessarily continue. We have massive issues within the squad. They need dealt with. And I hope Martin, and again, this is the thing, one of the things that concerns me straight away this weekend, Martin was very complimentary about Casper when he was here before. I hope he's watched the last couple of games, because that's the first person needing dropped. And that's even saying Sinisalo didn't cover himself in glory. So, again, we didn't even get into the individual players, but I'm really, really hoping that this board for once actually make some decisions that allow the manager to get the players that he needs. And I don't think Martin is going to accept substandard players that are basically, some sort of project for when he is long, long gone.
Yeah, I don't think, if the worst happens and we don't win the league, I don't think there'll be many people blaming Martin O'Neill. I think it will be squarely, at the foot of the board. And so they need to save themselves as much as they need to save the season, hopefully. I thought I asked you for positivity there, John. I must have been mistaken. I misheard myself.
Sorry,
That wasn't being positive.
That's as positive as we can get this season.
No, but listen, the legend is back, and we still have a chance at this. And we'll just leave it at that.
Europa League is in Istanbul. That's all we need to know.
Aye, he's going to take revenge for 2003. We're going to win the lot. And we'll end on that note. So thank you. I think we're 3,500 live. That is absolutely tremendous. We've broke down the game. I think we're hopefully over the worst. Martin is back, and we're all looking forward to attending the game on Saturday, which might not have been the case had Martin not came back, and we'll hopefully save our season. you know, it is Wednesday. Paul John is not with us, but I was joined by Yogi, my usual Wednesday comrade, and Kevin Graham, very kindly joining us as well. As you can tell, I've not done many of these outros. I've got absolutely no idea what to say, but this has been a Celtic State of Mind on a
Didn't
Wednesday
be bams to
afternoon.
each other.
Thank you.
There you go. That's all you
That's
need to
it.
say.
That's it.
Didn't be
Thank
bams
you
to
for
each other.
joining us on a
Yeah,
Celtic
well,
State of Mind.